Yeah. So, Madam Secretary, I'm going to go ahead and nominate Councilman Benavides as chair of this committee because our normal chair, Mayor Pro Tem Martinez, is absent. So, all those in favor, by acclamation, David, you're it.
Let's go to stand and salute our flag here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. So we do have several items here on today's agenda, first of which is the approval of minutes. But prior to that, I want to see if we have any members of the public who have addressed or approached us indicating that they would like to speak. We have Madam Secretary, any requests for speaking? Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I do have item number 4 was pulled by the city manager.
Okay. Thank you. And seeing no speakers, we'll go ahead and go to item number 1, which is approval of minutes. Do we have a motion for approval of minutes?
So moved.
I can go ahead and second. I'll go ahead then. Those in favor? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Mayor, you're sitting in, right?
I don't know.
Since
I mean, in the past, I've sat in on committees and I've been able to participate there when there weren't 2 other members. But I didn't announce it. I mean, I tried calling you guys, but why don't I just observe and
Okay.
comment?
I'll put my city attorney hat on. I think you can technically, I mean, this wouldn't, because Mayor Pro Tem isn't here, this
That's why
doesn't
I'm able to
disrupt
be
our
here.
quorum, so we can have you fill in.
Participate.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So, motion for approval minutes carries as written. We'll go ahead and move on to item number 2, which is a presentation on the Metro East Mixed-Use Overlay Zone. Mr. Deputy City Manager, do we have Planning Director here? We can. I'm assuming he's planning on attending. So
I just saw him.
We do have our planning manager that's going to be joining us. We can quickly find out from staff and see if they can make themselves available.
And by the way, I just received a text message from our city manager who says he's en route as well.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
And on this item, I just want to state for the record here that we do have here a letter from Mayor Pro Tem Martinez. This was just delivered to us here. Councilman, did you receive this
I just
previously?
saw it,
Okay.
I haven't read it.
So there's a 3-page letter from Mayor Pro Tem that provides some information and perspective and opinion. She provides some opinion and some thoughts for our consideration. Fortunately, did not have this information or this letter prior to, so I'll do what I can to review it personally, as I'm sure Councilman Sarmiento will. And we do have our Director of Planning and Building here with us, and again, we're going to item number 2 at this point. So, Mr. Tai, if you would like to
Thank
address
you,
the
Chairman
committee.
Benavides. Good afternoon, committee members and member of the public. This is an overview of the Metro East Mixed-Use Overlay Zone. This project was previously presented to the City Council at their August meetings and was continued to the next meeting. Our goal today, in terms of presenting in front of the EDIBIT Committee, is to provide an overview of the project, a status of the project, as well as seeking some input from the committee on potential changes or any recommendation for this project. The overlay zone is basically an extra zoning layer that is going to go over a proposed area. In this case, there is an existing commercial area, office professional, that is already existing. The proposal is to expand that, and the original MIMU was adopted in 2007. It's just east of the 5, and it's along First Street. So in 2016, the City Council, under the directions of a committee that's no longer in existence now and working with the City Council, authorized staff to conduct an analysis and an EIR to expand the MIMU zoning to along First Street all the way to Grand. The current MIMU, as I mentioned, is along First Street, and the proposal is to extend that all the way to Grand. It's also going to update some standards and land use sub-district in the current and both in the also the extended area. And the unique thing here is that as of today, it's going to continue to maintain the existing development cap that were originally placed and approved when the original MIMU was adopted. By doing so, it really keeps the existing environmental CEQA analysis in place. So the proposed expanded as well as the existing MIMU will share in the existing cap of a little bit over 5,500 units of residential, a net increase of about 963,000 square feet of commercial, and a net increase of about 690,000 square feet of office space that is overly currently what's existing right now. So just to clarify, residential is new to the area as the area is currently consisting of commercial and other office uses. So this is a map of the MIMU areas, both the existing
Mr.
and
Tide,
the...
before actually, can we go back a slide? And I do want to better understand, clarify. There's the existing Metro East mixed use overlay zone east of the 55 has a residential cap of 5,551.
Correct.
And then the respective 963 of commercial space and office space.
Actually, the cap is over 1 million square feet, but the net increase is 963,000.
Okay.
So let me give you the exact cap. Give me a second.
So
in the existing MIMU, there is limited to about 1.27 million gross square feet of commercial and 3.1 million square feet of office space. So that's the overall cap. But there are some existing commercial and
Right.
office spaces in place. So the 963 and the 690 represent a net increase.
okay. So as we look at the expansion, it says so that's going to be spread over the existing area and the expansion areas. When you say the expansion areas, is that the area that's being proposed west of the along First Street, west of the
Yes.
55?
Correct.
So in essence, we're adding land, but we're not necessarily adding more square footage.
Based on the
to-
current proposal, that's correct.
Okay. So is the idea then that it's somewhat of it's interesting, an interesting concept. So it's somewhat of a first come, first serve, if you will. If we get more development west of the 55, then the existing area, the east area would then have capacity for less. Our cap would be...
Correct. We're working with that cap for the entire existing as well as the expanded area.
What was the rationale to do that over allowing more square footage for any of these uses west of the...
I don't have the full history, but I think initially, based on the budget that was provided for the CEQA documentation, was really to look at creating the expansion for additional land area to create the additional opportunity for development opportunities. But since the development cap has not been reached, and I think since 2007, there's been a few projects, but not that many projects. So there's still a substantial amount of square footage and number of units that can be produced without reaching or approaching the capacity of the cap. So the idea was to get something done relatively quickly, expand the area for additional land development opportunity, and then without having to tweak the existing CEQA documentation too much.
I see. Thank you.
So this is a map of the area. As you can see, the existing area is to the right of the screen, existing MIMU area which consists of a little bit over 200 acres between the 5 and the 55. And the proposed expansion area is along First Street, east of the 5. So just so we're clear, this is the existing unit, and this is the proposed expanded unit area. And to go back to your question, both those areas will share the same capacity cap as analyzed today. In terms of the changes, they're both policy type level changes as well as the map expansion changes. And I'd like to go over that areas right now. The setback, some of the changes in the policy includes setback requirements so that it allows for a different level of building massing. Right now, the setback requirement has a step back based on the height of the building. So what you end up getting is that you tend to get a layer cake effect, which doesn't look all that great. But understanding there is a goal of ensuring for high urban form, well designed. The setback has been tweaked so it allows for buffer zone, but still gives the opportunity to maintain a building and massing. So that we don't completely eliminate the opportunity for the shallow development along more of the shallow lots. In terms of open space, it's just really making it consistent with other requirements of other specific plan and overlay zone throughout the city, going from 100 square feet to 90 square feet, which matches similar to the harbor plan. What's significant is the land uses, allowing for multi-family residential development in the Village Center Land Use Area District. Currently, in this district, it allows for lower density residential, and by allowing for higher density residential, this change could really help to achieve the goal of higher density, higher intensity development for some of the major large land area in this zone, and it also look at extending that zone to an area that is just north of what's existing now. And I will show you that on the map shortly. In terms of the map changes, obviously there is the extension of the MIMU between the 5 and Grand along First Street. And then also within the existing area in the Village Center, as I previously mentioned, there's an expansion of the existing Village Center to allow for basically one zoning over a district, and with the addition of multifamily residential that will allow for a mixed-use development opportunity in that area. So in the expansion area along First Street, we have the first here is the Neighborhood Transition District in yellow. Within this area, the density is about 20 to 30 units per acre, allowing building up to 4 stories. So it's much more mid-rise, lower density development. And that is from Lion Street all the way to Grand, both north and south. The current designation is commercial and residential, which allows for structures of 35 to 65 feet high. Again, this is an overlay zone, so it doesn't create an immediate change to the existing zoning. Existing uses and land use and development can still occur with the underlying zone. The only time that this zoning would be able to extend is to when it gets activated, basically. There's also the proposed urban district, which is in purple, close to Elk Lane, both north and south between Elk Lane and Lion along First Street. This is a high density development area that allows up to 90 units to the acre and a building of unlimited height. The current zoning also is commercial in designation and similar to the other areas. Allows structure for up to 35 feet north of First Street and unlimited height south of First Street. So, active urban district, purple, and then the neighborhood transition district in yellow. In the existing MIMU area, in addition to the text changes, there is a proposed extension of the Village Center District from its current configuration to also include the yellow district, which is the Neighborhood Transition District. The goal of that Neighborhood Transition District is to buffer the higher intensity development standard of the Village Center. However, directly behind that are medium density residential, but also a park. So we felt that it would be a good opportunity to eliminate this dual zone for area for this district to create the opportunity for a more consistent development, but still have policies in place that will help to create that buffer for any development projects to reduce its impact on existing land uses to the north, because we don't see that changing anytime soon. So that is the change in terms of the map boundary. It didn't change the physical boundary, it's just the boundary of the village district. So in terms of, we heard from the city council on some of the concerns as to the proposed changes, and right now we're in the process of trying to address some of those concerns. And what we heard was, you know, we need to look at fiscal impact and analyzing, you know, the economic benefits, the long-term economic benefit of development projects in the area. So, you know, other question was, do we have adequate provisions in place to create this vibrant, you know, urban commercial activity centers within the MIMU? Do we have regulations in place that helps to create that? Because, you know, since 2007, we haven't really had many projects that comes along, and the ones that do come along has very little commercial element in place. So the question is, you know, is there economic incentives to be able to create that? Do we have regulations in place that ensure that, you know, that is in alignment and consistent with the vision of the city council? So that was a question, and that's some of the things that we're looking at to be able to do that. But also to really look at some flexible design opportunity that will help to address market conditions as you know, the market economy either shrink up or you know, have an opportunity like we have today. What we have today in terms of development interest is not going to last forever. It is, there will be a slowdown, and when there's a slowdown, we will have to really look at additional, if any, incentive, and really have to push certain area hard to be able to get development. But since we do have this development cycle in place, you know, what we want to do is to be able to take advantage of that. So those are some of the things that we're looking in terms of just trying to address some immediate concerns of the city council. But the goal today is to, after I've done this overview, is to listen to the committee, listen to the council members on some of your feedback, and hopefully answer some questions and get some direction so that we can go back to the city council at the first meeting of September with a recommendation on the MIMU proposed expansion and amendments. So that concludes my brief report, and we can answer any questions that you have at this point.
I do have a question, then I'll come to my colleagues here. From your presentation specifically, going back, I don't know, maybe 3 slides from the end, perhaps, there was one where you were providing specifically the MIMO expansion area.
Yes.
Where you just made the distinction between the two zones, the neighborhood transitional district and the active urban district. In both of those, you highlighted the number of units, the allowable number of units per acre to be built, and the height as well.
Right.
Neighborhood transitional being 20 to 30 units per acre, and the height or the number of stories being 4 stories max, and the active urban district being 90 units per acre, and the height being unlimited. So that speaks to housing units. When it comes to the commercial, what is the commercial makeup in those two districts or in that area, those two respective districts? Is there a required amount of commercial? Because it's primarily the whole idea. It's a mixed use overlay zone, right? So, is there an amount of commercial that is correlated to the amount of housing that's developed? Are there certain areas that is everything specific? Is everything that is going to be built required to be mixed use, or can it be standalone, either commercial, standalone residential within those two?
I think the way you look at the MIMU is that certainly you can do standalone residential project, you can do standalone commercial project, but what the MIMU does is it allows for the opportunity to create mixed multi-use development. So I hope that helped quickly answer that particular aspect of your question. In terms of the development intensity for non-residential, it's based on square footage, and in our line of technical analysis, we would use the floor to area ratio. In this particular case, staff, correct me if I'm wrong, but there isn't a minimum FAR requirement for commercial. They can propose as much commercial on a site, potentially, that's correct? So there isn't a stipulated, defined minimum amount of commercial on a development project site. If you were to have mixed use, what it does stipulate is that you have to, it provide very high level, aspirational type policy that says, the commercial shall be, included as part of the project per se, or something that, create community, or it does provide for some standard how it interfaces with the public street, but not particular to a minimum area.
Okay, so it doesn't necessarily require the MIMU doesn't necessarily require commercial in the
The existing
Yeah,
MIMU doesn't, but that level of specificity can certainly be tweaked relatively, at least for the short term, so we can have something that be provided as a minimum standard that could be considered.
Okay. I'll bring it back to my colleagues. I might have some additional questions, comments, but I'll bring it back.
And Mr. Mayor, why don't you go ahead? Do you want to
I've got
comment?
questions and comments, but I'm happy to wait, whatever you want.
Sure. Well, thank you for the presentation to staff, and I guess we should also remember that our planning director really kind of adopted where everything is now when he came on board. There's been significant work that's been done prior to your arrival, as is with our city manager. I think a lot of the workup was done before their time. So I know just getting familiar with everything has been challenging, so thank you for trying to get up to speed as much as you can. And I had the benefit of sitting with the applicants of one of the developments within the expanded area, the Elan, just a few minutes ago. So we had a good discussion because obviously there's been some concern with the way this is being rolled out. There's several questions from some of my colleagues on the council. I know for me as the ward representative, this is the first time I've seen this iteration of the project, and I think the last time I saw some version of it was maybe a year and a half ago, close to 2 years ago. So that's one of the things we spoke about with the city manager and the new planning director, is that when a project this size and a decision this large, expanding an overlay zone and the impacts it's going to have to a major arterial in town, it's really one of the gateways into town. And there's so much activity now along First Street. When you're talking about 1901 First Street, which is a Lion project, which is a beautiful project. The Ymca development a little further west. You have the Holiday Inn, who's going to be doing a ribbon cutting just next week, and those towers there, and just a lot of the activity. It's exciting, but at the same time, this one is 600 plus units. We want to make sure that we set some of these projects aside and work really closely with staff, the applicant, and the policymakers, so the vision is a shared one and we can all be familiar with it, as opposed to it being raised and brought to us sort of as a done or fixed concluded item. So the good thing I've heard is that the applicant is willing to sit down with staff and sit down with me as the ward representative to try to see what we can do about maybe adjusting that balance between commercial and residential. And I think the chair references something good, which is or something important, as does the Mayor Pro Tem in her letter to the committee, which is that delicate balance that we're trying to strike on, major arterials and major parcels like this one. We just don't have many like this left. And this is sort of an iconic site because it did house, the historic Saddleback Inn. And it's going to, replace what's been the Elks Lodge for years and years of being in town there. So we want to make sure that whatever backfills that, both those iconic sites is something that we can all be proud of. And I know the mayor's used this site before. Look, we know that residential is very hot and very popular right now, but we don't like to dumb down sites. We like to maximize their potential. We like to go vertical, I think. Councilman Benavides does. So that's something that I wish we would have spoken about early on. We could have, this is one of those sites we could have gone high, and we could have, relaxed some standards and made some exceptions here, because this is one of those sites I think that we can show a lot of density. When I go back and look at some of the changes to the overlay zone as we expand, if we maintain that cap of 5,500 residential units in an expanded area, what appears to me is we're diluting one of the goals of the original Metro East overlay zone. As originally drafted, that overlay zone was to activate an area which was the Golden Circle, sort of what we saw just north of 4th Street, where you had a lot of office buildings. I think Colton controls a lot of that property, and the vacant site by Arnell. We wanted to see a lot of mixed use, residentials right next to some, office space and commercial space, and that was the goal, right? To try to target that, to try to bring some attention to that. Well, if we expand and we keep that same cap, I don't know what that does to that goal. I think what it does is it kind of perverts that goal, and it makes it difficult for us to achieve, because now we're going to do the same number of units, but now we have a whole area along First to Grand to do that. So that is a little, to me, counterintuitive. I was having some trouble trying to figure out where the logic came from on that. But what I did see as well is that we have an EIR with an SCIR on top of that, probably triggered because of the historic nature of the Elks Lodge. It's not necessary. I don't think it's on the registry, but it certainly is an eligible property to be considered a Mills Act property. So that's probably what triggered that supplemental EIR. But what I was trying to grapple with is, how do we get both our goals achieved? If we want to expand that overlay zone with some revisions to it, with some improvements to it, while not stalling that too much and not stalling a project as significant as it is, working with the applicant and staff. And I think what's happened is, unfortunately, on our end, we've had just very high turnover on our end. There's been planning directors that have been acting and interim, and we've had city managers, unfortunately, that have come and gone during this period of time. So I think that's disrupted the flow and the momentum of this. But I think if there's a commitment by our staff, which I know there is now, because we have staff that is here with us to stay, and we have an applicant that's willing to go ahead and sit down. As the ward representative, I'm certainly willing to go ahead and dig in and try to make sure we clarify some of these things, because we did have these conversations. At one time we had a conversation about abandoning and vacating Elks Lane, and then maybe giving that residual land to the developer so we can build a multi-level parking structure, share that parking structure between the zoo patrons and the developer. And I know we were just recalling one of those versions when we initially met. And then, we some other conversations after that. But what happens when there's no connectivity between, or no dialogue between staff and the policymakers, is exactly this. There's a disconnect. And, what we see as a final product isn't exactly what we had wanted to see early on. And this is a very valuable site. And I want to reserve comments on, just some other concerns that I mentioned to the applicant, things that we might be able to address and I might be flexible on. What we're trying to do by developments, our new residentials, is address the needs of our existing residents. And our existing residents, our existing demographic, we have families. We don't have many single folks. We have folks who have large families that need 2 and 3 bedroom dwellings. And so to the extent we can get more projects that we can have our Santa Ana families move into, it's just very challenging. And so our market rate, our friends in the market rate world, working with our, housing opportunity ordinance, hopefully will help us achieve that. But, one of the goals is to make sure that we do provide some resources for our existing families. We certainly welcome others in from other cities, but we have our first responsibility to our folks who live here in town. So I would, say to staff, I think we talked about maybe being creative. Maybe, either we segregate these two things and maybe take them independently, and if we somehow join them later after we have discussions on maybe improving and making adjustments to the expanded overlay zone and some of its provisions, and taking a look at the Elon really focused in now, maybe they can be merged back together and we don't have to do a separate EIR. We don't have to reinvent things, and maybe we can bring them back in. But this is kind of clumsy to me. It makes it difficult for me to logically say, let's expand, while I don't want to infect the Elam project with some of the challenges the expansion has, and vice versa, right? So I just think that it's cleaner if we take some time to maybe bifurcate the two and try to look at it. And I think to Mayor Pro Tem's point, since she's not here, and I think the thrust of her letter is we want to understand, and I know AECom was brought in towards the tail end, to consult on this, to give us, what their take is on the fiscal impact, right? I know that their 2-page letter is very broad, very high level, but they need a little bit of time as well to maybe dig in on this and give us an idea of what the fiscal impact is. So I would say that's another, concern, just to see, what this does to us. Is this a benefit to our community? Is expanding it? I always thought it was a good idea to do it from the beginning, but for whatever reason it was, it was contained to the 5 freeway and east of the 5 freeway. So let's find out why now there is a benefit when there wasn't one before, and should we adjust some of the other provisions in there? So those are my comments for right now. I think as well I want to reserve until I hear some additional maybe feedback from staff also.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got several thoughts and concerns, and some of it just maybe general frustration, because we've been at this a long time, since it originally began. These have been very difficult projects to move forward, and it seems to me like we're at the 11th hour and we're rethinking a lot of stuff. So I'm trying to figure out, how do we, if we want to rethink, that's okay, but how do we not shoot ourselves in the foot in the process? I remember the Saddleback Inn when we were taking down that bridge. That was a long time ago, and it was tough, and we were taking it down. As a matter of fact, I think our city manager was Public Works Director at the time. What year was that? Well, when it comes to you, let us know. But I know it was an Easter.
It was an Easter weekend.
And
I left in 2013, so this might have been somewhere around 2012 or so.
So what I'm saying is, my gosh. And then after that, I remember, when the Saddleback burnt down and it was empty, but the operator didn't want to tear it down. They thought they were going to rehabilitate it, and it was a tremendous hazard. It was a fire hazard, a safety hazard. We worked so hard to get a court order to get them just to take it down. And that is, again, so long ago. So, we're going at a snail's pace here if you look at it in proper context. So I'm just concerned that right now, if we don't figure something out, we're going to lose a development cycle. We'll have another few years of an empty piece of land. Across the street where the bridge used to go, it's a building that's already in trouble. Drugs, prostitution, you name it. That's what's happening there, and that's bringing us down. And if we can't figure out how to get this project off the ground soon, things slow down. A few months go by. Maybe they decide they're not going to build it. I can't speak for the builder, but I know that there's development cycles, and that would really be an unintended consequence. And so I just want to figure out, how do we, if we want to study more, let's study more, but how do we approve elements? Because folks have been waiting a long time. I mean, I remember this MIMU, and maybe staff can answer this. I think it was going to be done about a year ago originally, before we had some of the staff turnover. And maybe this staff can't answer it, but maybe, is there any staff here that can tell us when it was originally going to be approved?
Our staff was nodding, yes, your timing is about correct.
About a year ago.
Yeah.
About a year ago, this was supposed to come before us, but then it got more study. And so it's just frustrating to watch the clock move that slowly. Now, the discussion about the number of units, a question I would have is, let's assume that we were to prorate whatever units we had before, the 5,500 or whatever, and say we're going to keep that same density on the west end. Ultimately, what does that mean? I mean, you'd end up with another 1,000 units or a certain number of additional units, and then the EIR would have accommodated that in the study. But if we do it now you're going to need a new EIR, because we're changing everything if we just increase the unit count. Any thoughts on that?
So, in the beginning of my presentation, that question was asked, and based on the amount of money that was provided in the EIR to complete that time, my estimation was that the intent was to really just extend the existing boundary without creating additional cap, because the development interest that we have been able to track to the area has not anywhere approached to that density cap.
And I heard
right?
your answer, but,
Yeah.
but I believe that if we had additional units, ultimately it would only impact us long-term in the future after all these other
Right.
things are impacted. That would be enough time to say we want to do a new EIR, we think there's more density that the area can absorb, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think we need to answer that question now and have it meaningful, because we have, you need 10 of these projects to exceed what you're talking about, and more projects are coming, but 5,500 is still a lot of units. I've got more thoughts, but go ahead, Vince.
Well, you remember the 20-story and 21-story towers that were supposed to go
That I
in
wanted.
1901, right? And then Shea had looked at doing a 20-story tower on the Yarnell property. So, look, these things were at the time this overlay zone was initially introduced, they were real. So those numbers are real. Probably not today, but yeah, to your point of how long we've been waiting, look at number 3 on our agenda. So we've got some pain about some projects that have been lingering with us because that YMCA development even precedes discussion of the whole overlay zone. I think we brought that in the.
I just want Councilor Benavides to be able to vote on something before he's gone.
I know.
That he actually completed in 12 years.
Well, we've been waiting for those, right?
So maybe we can figure something out. I think that you're right, Councilmember Sarmiento, that when we're looking at 20-story towers, these numbers were more meaningful in the sense that maybe you could exceed those numbers. But right now with not anything of that elevation, it's you've just got a whole lot of building to do in order to get there, and that's a different long-term story. The other thing I want to talk about briefly is just retail, because we're all saying we need more retail, we need more retail, we need more retail. And I know, like, when I look at 1901, it's tough to get a lot of retail in certain settings because it's difficult to make it real attractive. I look like retail over at, City Place. There, I think it works well because you have a certain critical mass on the retail. And I'm really, really, really happy that we ended up doing some retail when we did that project, but it's several acres of retail. You've got the Mother's Market, you've got now the Olive Garden, you've got banks, you've got a food court, you got live workspace all around the corridor, but that's, a tipping point. That's enough retail that you're going to attract something. At 1901, I think they have about, 5,000 square feet or so of retail, something in that magnitude, and that's a real tough order. People, they don't, why go there? Maybe you got a coffee shop or something, but where do you park and what do you do? And look, people are busy. They're competing with everything else that is out there. We have to be real strategic about how we handle retail to make it viable. Otherwise, I think we're going to end up with empty spaces within buildings because nobody wants to be there because they don't have any, enough customers. So I think a bigger long-term analysis of how do you do retail. I think you do retail if you have those 20-story towers, and you can do vertical retail. But horizontal retail is real tough when you're talking about this type of construction. Does staff have any thoughts on this retail concept?
I think, both of you have issues that are relevant to the discussion, but one thing I'd like to add is that I think we're in a situation where retail is changing. There's certainly, a big component of retail in the brick and mortars that people are not expanding. Instead, you'll see some existing retail that are kind of shrinking. I think the strategic element that we need to look at here is not necessarily the quantity, but really the programming of the space. How do we approach a project that is going to have a deliberate purpose in place? If we're going to have a residential community that's include mixed use, our goal could be is one that we create a destination-based project that has elements of retail that will help to be catalytic for other properties in the area. So, so rather than because it is very challenging to have vertical retail in a large square footage when you have a project with narrow frontage, but I think what we have spoken, and this has been shared with other developer, including the one at the Elan project, is to really look at how we can start to deliberately and look at how we can program the space, how we can go after certain niche market so that we can create a destination, and that's something they think that could be easily be completed. And I think that level, in terms of being the forefronter, the leaders, is something that we should consider be flexible so that we can help get some of these projects along. As more residential, more customers come into the area, I think that will help to bring being the leader, that will help to bring in the additional retail that could happen in place. But we have to have a vision for our catalytic project, and this vision needs to be shared now so that we can say we can buy onto this, and I think it's something that we can expand upon. So it's something that I think the existing developer is very much willing to participate in, and be able to help us create that vision for this project so that it can start to expand into other project areas within the expanded area. So, go ahead.
Yeah, if I can, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Chair, to that point, and I think there wouldn't be an unreasonable request to say, go ahead and do half your space in commercial. It's finding that delicate balance, right? He's on a major arterial, or this is a major arterial first, right next to the city zoo, right next to other commercial activity with residentials coming in. So it's not like you're being a pioneer of, amenities in a barren space. This is an active area. To the extent we can continue activating it, I think that was the original intent of the MIMU. And so that was the original intent of Metro East, was just to activate it, make it more pedestrian friendly. So I think being reasonable is the key word here. This is certainly going to be a benefit to whoever invests here. We want them to be successful, but we want there to be a community benefit as well. So to the extent it becomes a space, and I'm glad to see that there was a courtyard built into that. I think that's helpful because hopefully it'll become a space that the public can enjoy as well. But we want to make sure that as we develop, we want to make sure that our communities don't just have places to reside, but they have places to place make, and I think that's what sometimes we forget. We can do a bunch of residentials and it'd be great, and we're going to capitalize on this market wave that's happening, but in the end we're going to have a bunch of residentials with no places for families to go. Then they're going to go shop someplace else. They'll just keep going further east into Tustin, go into their old town and go spend their money there. And then we're going to say, look, we had the time, we had the opportunity, and we let it slip through our fingers. Now is the moment to problem solve these things, because we're not just looking at one site, but we're looking at the impact that one site has to an entire major corridor in town, right off the 5 freeway, one of the busiest freeways that we have around us. So I think we just have to be intelligent and thoughtful, and as we make decisions, let's not make them in a vacuum. Let's see how they sort of reverberate and help improve the entire area. So that's my goal, and again, being reasonable is part of the whole conversation.
Let me jump in and provide a little bit of comment here, some background, perhaps some feedback from staff. This is something, as to your point, Mr. Mayor, we have been looking at and discussing for a number of years. 2007, I think I was sharing with staff, I think I was on the planning commission when we first started discussing the MIMU before it actually came, and had an opportunity to see it come to fruition while on the council. So it's been a number of years. The project, this area around, however, going back when we approved it, 2007, we saw a couple of projects, but it hasn't yet provided the outcomes that we had initially envisioned. More recently, in the last couple of years, when we then were discussing expanding, because we see that the First Street corridor, it's a gateway into the city. It has opportunity. One is those motels and other projects around First Street. They actually contribute to blight rather than actually providing some type of benefit, some type of amenities positive to the city. So we were looking at how do we activate that. I think that what I recall, that the natural idea was potentially expanding the MIMU in. A direction was given for that's to be studied and to be developed. However, that was in 2016. Part of what I was sharing previously, that was 2 years ago that we discussed that, and then 10 plus years back when the MIMU was first approved, council hasn't been able to, perhaps with all the transitions of staff and all, we haven't been pulled into the discussion. The key role, responsibility that council members are charged with is land use, is guiding and directing land use, setting policy so that the city can thrive, can develop and to its full potential. So unfortunately, because of that some of that gap, and it's been some time, we're here at the 11th hour now having this discussion. In my mind, the question is, how do we try to do both? One is ensure that we are making wise policy decisions, yet at the same time move projects forward. And so it's a very sensitive spot and position that we find ourselves in. And so what I'm seeking is, and I also respect the fact that we have the council member who happens to be on this committee that in whose district this whole area lies. So I definitely value that the input and the feedback and insight and vision that you might be able to provide towards what we want to see collectively within this area. But want to see what, as we've been discussing this for some time, ultimately I know what staff needs is direction, at least for the recommendation that's going to come before council, because we're simply a committee here. Ultimately, council will give the policy direction. Options that we've been looking at. One is what came before us at council a couple of weeks back, was just basically to move forward with what staff was presenting. At the same time, the question is, is that truly maximizing the potential in this area? There's this idea of we actually talked about bifurcating. We've talked about a number of different things. I want to bring it back to my colleagues here to see what
your thoughts might be.
Just
Mayor.
a couple
Mayor.
more thoughts and comments in that area. And one is that if you look at 1901, and maybe staff can tell me what's the retail square footage there? I mean, it's a metric. Any idea?
2,500 square feet against how many units? 260 units.
All right, 2,500 square feet. Wasn't there another project some time ago that we did and it had some retail? Anything else in the area?
We recently approved and entitled one right across the street, the Madison, right, on Cabrillo.
That's all residential.
Does that have any, does that have a retail component? Please, go ahead.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it does. It has about 6,000 square feet of
The
retail.
Madison.
The Madison does.
And how many units there?
277?
Okay. And how many square feet at this project, the one we're talking about, the lawn?
9?
So what's existing proposed is about 8,000 square feet with a potential expansion for doubling that size in terms of
So about
18 to
18,000,
potentially 20, correct?
18 to 20,000. So it seems to me if you say 2,500, 6,000, 20,000, I know there are more units, but nonetheless, the trend is up on a square footage per unit basis. And also, I think at bigger numbers, you can do more stuff. You can have potentially a bigger restaurant. I mean, I see with a zoo some ability to draw some of that traffic over and have them come and eat. But I'm thinking with this kind of square footage, you've got an opportunity to do a few things. I don't know if a brewery potentially or something that draws people. You know, over at City Place, one of the biggest successes is that guy that does the original hems. They come in from all over the place to people to, get their plants shortened or whatever, hemmed. And I think, does the applicant have any comment on this? The potential uses, and if you have 20,000 feet of retail, what might you do with that? Don, please come up to the mic. Did you guys talk about that?
Everybody's in love with breweries, so I guess, no, I'm teasing. It has a lot of opportunity there. We were talking about a combination of different uses, such as a quick service food use in that area. That would fit in quite well with the zoo. We take a look at service-oriented retail in that particular area that would start with the residents that we have, and then as other residential projects are built down First Street towards Grand, they would also be able to utilize that. We're also looking at, after our meeting today, potentially adding another floor, which would increase the commercial component by nearly 50%. And that could be used as a co-working type of space that could also be not only for the residents, but for other outside office type uses for startup companies, small companies, very flexible in the use that they have.
Let me ask you, you're ready to start construction one of these years, correct?
We were hoping 2020.
Start construction.
Yeah, we still have construction plans to do.
So if, to go to Councilor Sarmiento's point, if there are certain changes to the project, could they be done in parallel somehow so that you don't miss your 2020 construction date?
We were talking, it wouldn't be able to start day for day, basically, at the same time. But there is some flexibility. If we can find a way to find a vehicle to approve the project without having the MIMU or having the MIMU approved in some form of what it currently has and then expand, as you said, Mr. Mayor, the ability to change that, you're probably looking at the next housing cycle. Everybody's tippy-toeing right now on the fact that the housing cycle is probably in its last year to 5 years of expansion. A lot of it will depend upon political decisions that are made in November. Some of it will be made on financial decisions that are going to be made over the next year or two, as far as interest rates, making it impractical to do this. This project here is over a $200 million investment. And so when you're carrying interest on that, that adds up pretty quickly, more than a piggy bank.
If we were not to change it, when would you be ready to start construction?
If we didn't change it, we should be able to be under construction in the first quarter of 2020.
And at this point, you'd be ready to go forward with it, or would it still depend on interest rates and?
No, we have our financing in place. We're ready to go. Now, one of the things we can do is we can be flexible. It's separated into two buildings for a couple of reasons. One of them could be that there's not much question in my mind yet. I haven't heard any regarding the back building that we have, building number 2. Again, we'd need some sort of vehicle from land use perspective in order to be able to start that building. We could just reverse the roles that we have, and we're talking about all the modifications that we would be working on the front building, which I believe we can meet the objective of what we're talking about here regarding some additional economic development in that area by increasing the commercial/retail area. We can do that by modifying our current plan. It's just a matter of, not quite as easily as we spoke about earlier, of an eraser and new pencil marks. It takes a bit of work, but that could end up being a 5-story wood frame apartment structure over 3 stories of the commercial type area.
So yeah, I wish the mayor would have been, he should have joined us for our meeting, because we had, we spoke about an eraser and not an eraser that's going to erase half the design. It's just adjusting on the front end. But, we also, these are the conversations, and I know staff's heard this ad nauseum from us. These are the conversations that we needed to have with your predecessors much earlier, right? And that's why I was asking the applicant when we met, who was their consultant, because their consultant really should have been helping them shepherd this through, because as the chairman was talking about, as policymakers, we want to make sure that we not only guide public policy and land use decisions, but we also want to expedite. We don't want to slow anybody down. We also don't like to see, major projects like this done simply. We want them to succeed. We want them to be 20 years, 30 years down the line from now, be projects that the city and the residents will be proud of. And just to get it through, just to get it done, I'm sure is not something Don's going to be proud of later on when they say, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you think of this? When the Elks held the property, I remember the Elks' first iteration of what they wanted to do was to put a hotel where the Saddleback Inn was. They were in conversations with Lowe's or one of the flags. And so, look, we've moved a long way from there because the market's moved away from that. But that doesn't mean that we can't be creative and not oppressive, but be creative with the applicant. And the applicant certainly seemed at the meeting that we had willing to sit down and speak. And that's the positive upside to this, because I think if everybody's entrenched, then there's not much movement. But I think here, what direction I was going to give to staff was the same one I gave at the meeting, was for our staff to work on how we can either move forward on concurrent paths with looking at how we can work with the applicant of the Elon, and maybe talk to our consultant who did the EIR and the SCIR and see how we can, get the expanded overlay maybe tweaked a little bit without having to go out and do a revised one, right? How much ability do we have to maybe make some adjustments in that? So again, not trying to stall the expansion because of the project, and vice versa, and not stalling the project as a function of trying to adjust the expansion. So that's, I guess, the homework and the direction I would give to staff so they can work with us on and work with this committee on, because I think it can be done, and we're not talking about, an ad nauseum point of time, but I think just, being able to work on concurrent paths. And if we can merge them back together and that's the simplest way, then that's fine too. But let's figure that out. That's the conundrum I'm having with the way this was rolled out.
I would just like to make a comment, and that is that if you can't figure out how to do this conundrum, to give the council the original option you had, which was just to approve the original staff recommendation, we can always bring it back afterwards and continue to wrestle with this, because you may not be able to figure out how to do this parallel paths without impacting or having unintended consequences. Thank you.
If I can maybe offer some discussion points that we can consider in terms of moving forward. The existing development capacity cap that we have today on the project, as I mentioned, has not been reached. So I don't think with the approval of the Elan project, or even considering of any potential development project that are coming online in the next 12 months or so, we would reach that development density cap. So we can still be able to allow for development to occur, but I think the question is going to be is that can we look at policies that are tweaked so that we still continue with the existing development caps, but provide us with some very clear direction as to what is the vision for mixed-use development projects that are coming to our city, coming to this area along major sites. So I'm going to just share an example. One overall larger policy would be that projects that are located on site facing First Street on larger acreage needs to consider a placemaking type mixed-use development project that is going to be catalytic, and also it has to have a vision and not just come in and provide us. We're going to do so much commercial space, but really have a deliberate marketing process, something that we have gives our community a better picture of what we're going to be able to receive at the end of the project. So, as the applicant mentioned and the mayor and the council members mentioned, is that, a brewery, you could be creation of a brewery district. And what can this project potentially do to attract that? They can come in and say, we're going to be committing to working on retaining, a brewery here and then a restaurant. So it start to put in all these pieces of the puzzle. So I think there are policy tweaks that can be completed and provide to the council that could move the project forward, and while still meeting the goal. But also understanding the concern of the some council member about making sure that major projects check in and really get some opportunity for input is to, in the interim, maybe development projects between now and when some of the final policy get put in place, is that it does go back to the EDIBIT committee for presentation as it moves forward. So that way there's a check-in, but not necessary, check-in for consistency, but not necessarily an approval process. And then it can still stay within the approval framework of the MIMU, which is something that's permitted and go through the planning commission process. So it satisfies both the meeting the requirements of not having major impact to the existing environmental CEQA document that's been assessed, because it still maintained the existing development capacity. What policy changes are really just mixing the pieces of the puzzle, so that won't have any significant effect to the analysis. And you still have an interim process where major projects are checked back in with some committee that has the, I would recommend the EDIBIT because it does have some economic impact. So that way we get feedback, and as I mentioned, it's not an approval process, but it's really a checking in process. So they can still move everything along and meet the goal of some of the concerns I've heard here.
It sounds very similar to the Planning Commission work studies when you're looking at a larger project.
Correct.
It's kind of interesting to me that Planning Commission, that they get a lot more opportunity to really vet a project, speak into it, and by the time it comes to council, it's just it's a yay or nay. So it's just kind of an interesting concept. I know, Mayor, you had
Just a quick comment, Mr. Chair, and then I know we're going to move on. And that is that I'd like to bring it to the attention of the committee, city manager, and others, and that is that 1901, a project that we worked on for a long time, went up, it went down, went all around. Frank Surian and Line Living want to basically sell it. They've got it on the market. They're trying to get out. And to me, that's a very sad event. I think we ought to talk to them and try to get them to stay in the city. They're a good operator. But part of the reason is not enough other things have happened. They kind of went out there early. They have, break-ins and vagrants, and hopefully with the homeless thing that we've done recently, that'll improve. but they want to leave town. And if they leave town, that's a black eye because they're a quality operator. So to the to the level that we can be more in touch with them and seeing what the latest is and what's going on and can we help you and can we be a better host? And hopefully as some of these other projects start to go under construction and that brings more vitality and people and policing, it'll be a good thing. Because right now, I understand it's on the market.
Mr. Chair, just for the record and just to be clear, the mayor has been speaking as a member of the public. He's not a voting member of this committee, and his comments are taken as contextual for the record and for the purposes of this discussion. Just so I know, our city attorney probably would be concerned. As a city attorney myself in other cities, I always try to recommend that quorum not be broken. It wouldn't be either, but any of us can present ourselves to any other committee and speak as members of the public because we are residents as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. One question. I don't know that we've given you a lot of ideas. I don't know we've been very clear on suggestions, but I do have a question. This item will come back before council, so ultimately we want to give you some direction so you can have some options to present before council. One option that has come up a couple of times, you've already seen the status quo of the updating the existing MIMU and then doing this expansion. What we've been talking about this evening is that west of the 55 or west of the 5 freeway and potentially seeing some more intensification on commercial or some various options. There's one project that specifically is highlighted because they're getting ready to go. The speaker just addressed us on that one. If we were to, from staff, basically, how would we best address the potential updates to this prospective project or the MIMU? We've discussed at one point the idea of bifurcating the existing updates on the existing MIMU area to have that be done, move forward so we can focus energy on this one. If we approve the expansion, that's one question. Might that be the easiest way, the cleanest way to do things so that we can, again, focus on what we want to do in this area. If we end up approving the MIMU as it stands currently, and these opportunities and ideas that the applicant on this other project is considering making, does that, or any other project, I guess, if they want to come forward, basically once we've approved the land use policy, it's basically by right. Anything that basically anybody could go at minimum threshold at that point.
That would establish a development threshold, but it's still project would still have to go through the planning commission, as I previously mentioned. Just to respond to your question about the options. So the first option of approving the MIMO as proposed, which is including the expansion area, including the proposed policy amendment. Basically, what you would be approving is, the expansion, the policy changes to include mixed multi-use into into medium density area and commercial. But you will also be approving it at the existing cap, okay, for development intensity and density. If you were to bifurcate the project, and only approve the existing Elan area and not the expansion area. I'm sorry, the existing MIMU area, but not the expansion area. The Elan project would have to go through a different review and approval process. And they were waiting in the wings for the MIMU to take place. They participated in the development of the CEQA document. So it does move the existing area forward, but it doesn't move the expanded area forward. What I was talking about a few minutes earlier was, I think there's a way that all of the concerns can at least start to be discussed, and some of the concerns can be addressed immediately on some existing project, and allow additional time for staff to continue to work and address some of the concerns about, should we increase the density cap? Should we put in regulations in place that provide for higher density development, or do we not consider mixed multi-use? But or also maybe expanding the MIMU area to other areas beyond Grant Street. So some of those questions in the fiscal impact analysis are much longer terms. But what we could do is to have to come back to the council with an interim process that says that the adopted MIMU, we will also include these additional policy that says, we will incorporate X into a project, we will do this. So that it gives guidance for staff to work with developers that are currently interested in the development project area, to provide them with policy that says, this is what the vision is, this is what we need to do to address those concerns. And then, as I mentioned, to bring that and do a check-in with the EDIBIT so that it's kind of consistent with the direction that we're receiving, so that we can bring it back to the city council. For the existing Elan project, that can be done in a relatively short period. I would say that if we were to get direction from you, we would be able to come back to the city council early October, because that would give us a chance to check back with the EDIBIT on the policy that we're proposing, so that they're comfortable with some of the policy language. Come back in early October to propose both the approval of the MIMU and the certification of the EIR. And from there, the Elan project, it can be made consistent with those policy and can proceed with the path of its checking back in with the EDIBIT on the interim, and then eventually to the city council, city planning commission. So that would move everything forward. Get direction for staff to continue with the expanded and in-depth analysis of land use decision, the fiscal impact analysis of both the expansion but also the policy changes. Give policy direction for staff to work with existing projects, because with those overarching policy that are very specific in place, we can work with developers to say that, while we don't have an exact formula, but these are the goals, and we need to make sure that we meet these goals with the project that we're proposing. And we're checking back in. It's not like we're going blind and saying, coming back and surprise the council, here's a project based on your policy. No, we're not doing that. We will be checking back in.
Thank you, Mr. Tao. I want to bring it back to members of the committee. I think.
I think we've discussed this thoroughly. I think we can't be more thorough than this. I like that direction. I think I would certainly move and recommend to staff and recommend to the committee that we take your suggestion, Director Tai, and move it that way. And I'm glad you mentioned the fiscal impact study. I think it's important. I think the Mayor Pro Tem was real clear that she wanted to have that done. I think it's important. We could probably have that done relatively quickly. Again, the CEQA document isn't going to be disrupted if we give high-level policy direction changes.
Right.
It's only disrupted when you go in and you really start making material, substantive changes to it, when you're going to have to go out for further comment and just revise the document altogether. I think that that's not what we're doing here. I think we're trying to hopefully finesse it, make it a better document, and improve everybody's experience here, and still achieve the goals that we originally intended. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, no, I'd concur. I'll second that. I think there was some very productive conversation, some good comments from the public, Mr. Mayor, and that contributed to be able to get us to a point where ultimately we want to see things moving forward. We want to be able to address some of this, capturing opportunity within that zone, that area. And so I think that the recommendation of being able to work on this concurrently and expeditiously, so that some of us who are going to be cycling off can have the opportunity to be able to vote, hear this, and hopefully move it forward.
I would ask that I don't know when the date is, but if we can get your commitment to a special meeting, so that we can circle back, provide you with some policy recommendations on the tweak to the MIMU, and take that forward. And then using those policy, relying on that, we will then advise potential applicant in the MIMU area on policies, so we can continue to develop that. And as mentioned, project as they move along on the interim, we will check back with the EDIBIT committee for consistency with those policies.
Yeah.
And, based on that, we can move everything forward in parallel.
Sounds good. I'm sure that we would be willing to do that, to come back on a special, so we can, again, move this expeditiously.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So both of us, members of the committee, we've got first and second, so that motion, if you can make it clear for yourselves. I think we gave general direction and provide some input there. And we can move on then to the next item,
Thank you.
which is YMCA RFP discussion on next steps. Got my name's listed there on that one. We had a very a good conversation actually last time that this committee met, and I appreciate. Yes. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate staff's work on the YMCA RFP, bringing the applicants here before us. I know that at the last meeting, there was general discussion. It was opportunity for us to take in some of the presentations, provide some initial feedback. This is another one of those projects where it's been quite some time. It's been a number of years, and we want to get to a place where we can give staff some more clear direction again to be able to help help us, and help move the city forward. So I know we've had some conversation. I don't know, Mr. Stephen Mendoza, if you'd like to make any comment. Otherwise, we can go ahead and open it up to the committee here.
No, I want to thank you both for taking the opportunity at your last meeting. I know we spent a lot of time with it. It's an important project to you. It's important to us to deliver it to you. We just want to keep the process moving.
Thank you. And to that end, some of the feedback and members of the committee provided, again, all of the projects in and of themselves had some merit. I think all four that you brought before us. However, some of the conversation did revolve around looking at economic development. Some of the theme of even the previous conversation, looking at there being some economic benefits. There was also mention of the fact that, again, each of them had some merits, and there was even some conversation about seeing various projects come together. I think even the suggestion of all four, we've got some great applicants and concepts. However, what I would like to have us consider is that there are, I would say, at least two projects that would be able to potentially be able to provide even mutual benefit to the respective projects and ultimately to the community as a whole, possibly having some economic benefit and also provide some uses that would be of benefit to the community. So I'll bring it back, see if Mr. Sarmiento, if Councilman Sarmiento has any additional feedback, and then potentially hear from staff if there's any further discussion or further direction. We can be as clear as identifying, narrowing down to a couple of the specific applicants, or can give you some general direction for you to be able to go back depending on what would be most helpful for you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to staff, and thank you, Director Mendoza, for putting the program and the presentation together last time. It was impressive. I think it's nice to show and see that there's interest in that site and that there's a lot of great ideas that are floating around out there. What I think has been challenging for us is that we really did believe in the, sort of the predecessor project that was presented to us years ago by St. Joseph, and we all thought we, could get behind it, and we wanted them to realize that goal. But it really, really did, disappoint us in the end because, they couldn't realize it and we just lost a lot of time. And as we just had the previous discussion, time is really our enemy on a lot of these things. We saw that the site now has been sort of, become a blight now, more of a blight than it was before. And so to the extent we can cure that pretty quickly, I think is a good thing. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. And I know the chairman was, one of the first to speak up and say, let's manage these assets well and let's get this done quickly. Well, here we are, at the tail end and at the 11th hour of, some of our terms, and, we want to make sure we move things along. So again, all those ideas and all the presentations that were made to us were really impressive. But what I kept coming back to was Caribou's relationship to the multi-level parking structure behind it. And, you know, having that parking structure adjacent to the site itself, I think makes it really difficult to somehow envision them not having a role, right? I think that, Mayor Pro Tem's conversation or comments to us and remarks to us at the last meeting was maybe we do all four. Well, that's really difficult to manage, and it sounds great, but it just is practically and logistically, I think, really challenging. To the extent that we have somebody who's still interested in fact, that person, Caribou, bid on the initial procurement when we went out and we decided to go with somebody else, and not saying that, it would have gone, who knows if it would have gone differently or not, but I guess my point is that they've been interested in developing the site, and because I think they have that parking structure is a real benefit to this. So I do think, to the extent that maybe I really like what I heard from OSHA, and I know OSHA and Caribou have worked together on other projects. To the extent that they can have maybe some way to roll OSHA into that hotel/community, development. And I think, Mr. City Manager, you keep hearing community benefits. So, it's not by mistake. So now, as we move through each project, we just need to make sure that there is some community benefit. Before, in the past, I think it's been, well, hey, let's just support and entitle this project and let's move it forward, not really looking at, well, are our residents getting some value to this? And so I think just because a hotel generates revenue, well, it could provide a community benefit, because there could be conference room space, there could be space that the public could use, and especially if it has something companion with it, like a school where our residents, our students could attend. Those are community benefits. Those are things that enhance the experience of our residents that live here. So that really is going to be, I think, for me, an underlying theme in anything that we adopt and support, or at least that I adopt and support, is that making sure that we don't just adopt something or approve something without that question being answered. So that would be my suggestion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. I know that there's a committee of staff members that have been reviewing and are scoring the projects and such. Part of what you wanted to be able to hear from us at the last meeting from the council is feedback from council members to be able to factor into ultimately the recommendations that staff will bring before the full council. I would echo some of the comments that Councilman has made. Basically, looking what I would hope is that the staff would be able to provide to the council a project or that is most feasible, realistic, looking at some of these factors, from the parking, the fact that this is landlocked, the parking dynamic, looking at the fact that part of the theme you've been hearing is economic development as well, an economic benefit to the city. And then this other piece, a community benefit as well. Something like OSHA as an example. They also represented that they would have some nonprofit serving organizations that would be able to serve the community and our youth in particular. So what carrying through that theme of being able to put something together again that is feasible, that brings both of those economic and community benefit. And potentially seeing a couple of things together. It doesn't have to be, basically, I think that the conclusion is that it doesn't have to be one sole applicant that that council sees, but rather if staff is able to look at bringing a couple together and bringing them so that they work together, looking at what role the city might play. If we need to creatively be a part of the mix, we hold the this is a property that the city holds. If we need to somehow, be a part of the mix and be able to make this happen, I think that that's something that we'd be open to looking at as well. Creative partnerships, so that again, it's we have something that we can consider, hopefully approve, and see come true to reality. So, and again, hopefully within a short period of time, we can see within the next month, if possible, to have something that the full council can look at, can consider, and that we can potentially move forward. And any additional comments, questions from?
I think we
staff?
have clear direction to do a little matchmaking
Okay.
and score accordingly and bring it back to the city council.
Great.
I'm getting that you don't want it back here.
I think that ideally we are able to get it to council. The committee's had a couple of opportunities to be able to address it. Well, this go around and then numerous times over the last several years. So we're ready.
I think we have clear direction.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Perfect. Thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and move to item number 5, as 4 has been pulled. This is the OC streetcar, very exciting project that's also coming to fruition that we're excited to be able to see. And we have a couple of members from staff at OCTA. Mr. City Manager, I'll hand the mic over to you, and if you want to go ahead and, or if we have other staff that's going to be addressing.
Actually, I'd just like to have our team and partners from OCTA introduce this. We're very excited. I personally, of course, was involved with the original alignment analysis and all of that, so I'm real privileged to be here now when we're getting ready to launch. So welcome.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Teresa Oliveri for the Authority. I have the privilege of representing the project out in the community. I'm the Community Outreach Manager. And so I just wanted to kind of bring you a couple of milestones that we've reached and some next steps that we're approaching, and then segue into Stella's presentation to get some feedback from you on the design of the vehicles. So over the summer, we opened bids for the construction contract. And we went back to our board, and we had a budget revision, which was agreed to. And so now we're approaching the time when we can award the construction contract. That will be coming up, we believe, at our September 24th Board of Directors meeting. And so some other pre-construction activities that are ongoing are the utility companies have begun their work, moving their facilities out of the way in order to be ready for our contractor to begin their efforts. And so I just want to take the opportunity to thank the gentleman and the staff members that work on the permitting desk, because I know the utility companies have been keeping them very busy, and we appreciate the speed in which your staff has been turning those permits around for the utility companies. It's been a big help to us. We did award the vehicle contract to Siemens, and I'm going to let Stella kind of talk to you about the creative and technical elements that have gone into the different designs that we have to offer to show you here today.
Thank you very much. And I did have the opportunity I was going to say yesterday, felt like yesterday, but just a few days ago, to go through the whole presentation. Appreciate that. I know Councilman has been looking through the presentation now as well, and we chatted. So yeah,
Okay.
you can.
Okay, I will go quick.
Thank you.
But it's a great pleasure to be here tonight. And yes, it's a very exciting project. My focus tonight will be sharing with you the vehicle design for the OC streetcar. Okay, let's see. I mean, first of all, the goal of the branding, the vehicle design, is to create a branded identity to position OC streetcar as a modern transportation option for the entire Orange County. And first we did was reviewing our current branding guidelines. This is the bus branding, as you have seen on the street. And we want to ensure a cohesive family look across all of OCTA. We also review the vehicle that approved by OCTA board. This is Siemens S70. It has a 181 passenger capacity with 70 seats. The best part of this vehicle is level boarding. It's very easy to get on and off through the platform. So we look at the vehicle layout and we identify those areas that are more prone to damages. So we want to make sure our design and color choices around those areas stay simple and streamlined to avoid higher maintenance cost. We also review other streetcars across the country. This is from Atlanta. This is from Charlotte, Portland. This is Portland Light Rail. Salt Lake City, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Tucson. So after extensive review, we developed a set of criteria to frame the development process of OC streetcar vehicle design. We want to make sure the design is affordable to produce, is easy to maintain, is highly visible for safety reason, and it has a longevity through the product life cycle, like for the 10, 15 years down the road. Ensure brand continuity across all of OCT's mode of transportation. Of course, we want the design to convey Orange County personality, vibrant, diverse, progressive, and it also should accommodate advertising to avoid any degrading to the OC streetcar branding. I have 3 options here. We came a long way, and this is the final 3 candidates. So design number 1 has, as you can see from the slide, has very vibrant colors. It's all the blue, orange, light blue, white, orange OCT's color palette, and also have the graphics depicting movement, motion. Here's a slide with some advertising here. Those are just placeholder only. We may have different space or the whole vehicle available for wrap to generate revenue to support the operation. This is a 3D rendering with a matching OC streetcar stop. As you can see, the color of the stop has been coordinated with the vehicle to create a cohesive look. Here's the 3D with the ads. And here I have an animation of this slide. I'll show the sound. The sound doesn't come up. That's okay. There's a background sound like ding, 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 signaling OC streetcars coming. That's okay. So this is design number 1, and here comes design number 2. This is very similar to design number 1, except the bottom is white color. And again, when it comes to color, everybody has different preference. So this is another option. This is with the advertising, 3D, animation. Okay. All right, design number 3. As you can see, this design seems a little bit more simpler, streamlined, and also is the design more focusing on top of the vehicle. The reason is to avoid those areas on the bottom that are more prone to damage. The other reason is that there are more spaces from the rest of the vehicle for advertising purpose. And animation. This is just want to give you some perspectives. And so with that, we are currently conducting, I'm sorry, we have a couple slides with all the vehicle together. This is the, seems like, which one's faster? So we have all 3 together. Okay. So we are currently doing a lot of public outreach, attending community meetings, open houses. We send out a lot of surveys online and print surveys as you have in your packet. And meeting with a lot of advisory committee members, commuters, and residents. So our goal is to gather all the feedback. We will be able to conduct the analysis and make final recommendation to OCTA board early November, because the deadline to provide the final design to Siemens, the vendor, is also end of November. So that's our timeline. We wish we'll be able to come up with the best option, and we'll share that with the council when the time is near. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments?
No, I'm glad you did that last one with all three. That helps because
Right.
sometimes the color scheme you get lost.
Yeah.
But you know what? So I'm kind of torn between 1 and 3, and I like them both. I think if I had to be forced to choose, I'd probably select 1 just because I like the way there's a lot more multicolor
More
to
dynamic.
it.
Mhm.
And if you see, for us, and I was talking to the chairman right now. And I like it with advertising, by the way, so it looks great, and I think you could take advantage of a lot of things. For our town, it's a very unique part of the county, right? Because there's so much architecture, history,
Yes.
and culture,
Yes.
right?
Uh-huh.
So that's where I know that it's funny because when we were doing a hotel, and I forget what I think it was. It's over on Main and MacArthur, but we were working with them to do. I think it was a Marriott courtyard or something like that. And they used to have sort of a template that they would use for all their courtyards. But when we told them, look, Santa Ana is different than what you have in Tempe, what you have in maybe other parts of the state, other parts of the country, try to make it a little unique to reflect the area here. So to the extent that as you go through, these iterations are good, but I think the advertising will help maybe tailor some things to Santa Ana because it really is, I think, different than,
Right.
maybe some of the
Absolutely.
other 33 cities in the
Right.
county. And it could make for some unique opportunities. You want them to look like buses, and you want that brand, the
Right.
authority to be obviously visible to everybody, but you can still have fun with it. Right?
Absolutely.
You can still, I think,
Absolutely.
make it reflective of, hey, this is a very multicultural city. This is
Yes.
very unique, and people will have fun with it. I think it'll become less sterile. I think and I think more inviting, and people will embrace it a little bit
Absolutely.
more when it's like part of your community. So
Yes, yes.
just to the
Yes.
extent that that's done. But
Yes.
nice work on this.
Points well taken, and as a resident of Santa Ana, I totally understand, fully understand where you come from.
There you go.
And I can assure you there will be a lot of opportunity moving down the road when it's become operation. As marketing manager for OCTA, we'll ensure that what we do will be reflects the rich culture of Santa Ana and the diverse community here.
Thank you. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I actually had almost very synonymous feedback when I had the opportunity to do an individual presentation. Is that there is definitely opportunity to embrace and reflect the community, both here in Santa Ana and then even Garden Grove, as the streetcar will be running through that town as well. Thank you again for your presentation. We'll move then to the last item here, item 6, City Council Special Event Sponsorship Resolution and Policy. Mr. City Manager, Julie. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Good evening, committee members. I'll make this very brief. In your packets, your agenda packets, you have the draft policy for the City Council special events funds or program, if you will. As you are familiar, each council member receives an allocation of about $10,000 per fiscal year, and that sponsorship funding opportunity has been very successful over the last 3.5 years. It was approved by City Council in August of 2015. And in the first year of its implementation, there were 41 donation agreements. And at the conclusion of last year, the end of fiscal year, there were almost double, 79 donation agreements. So word is spread, and it's successful, and the community is definitely benefiting from the funding. As you know, the funds are specifically for 501c3 nonprofits or neighborhood associations in support of events or programs. And what you have before you today is a proposal to revise the existing policy and resolution to bring it up to become more efficient, cost effective, and so that we can get the dollars out into the community a little quicker. It is taking about 6 to 8 weeks for the organizations to receive the funds, and that's due to some of the bureaucratic process that we have in place. And so I'll outline some of the highlights of the policy as it's revised. So to begin with, the policy is now going to be centralized. It outlines procedures for anybody to handle and take over. It will also shift the donation agreements from taking every single donation agreement to the city council and have it approved more at an internal level. So, for example, as donation agreements are received, these ones that you're familiar with, council members will be asked to approve, and if you approve, then the city manager has the authority to then execute the payment internally through a DPV, a direct payment voucher, and then thereafter, in order to uphold transparency, we would provide the city council with the receive and file outlining all of the council members' donations balances and what has been executed already. By implementing just these two very small adjustments, it would reduce staff time and the back and forth with the vendors significantly. We could turn around these dollars in about 3 weeks instead of 6 to 8 weeks. It would also reduce staff time by more than half. Instead of 5 hours per donation agreement, it would be 2.5 hours at most. And that also translates to cost. Right now it's about anywhere between $300 to $500 per donation agreement in staff cost, if you will. And if we were to be able to process this internally, we would eliminate the use of the city clerk's office, city attorney's office, and then just minimize the back and forth and the bureaucracy with our neighborhoods and our 501c3 nonprofits. So it would make it that much more efficient. We could also implement one extra layer of transparency for council, because I know that this is important for council members. This was brought forward by council. At the beginning of each fiscal year, we can provide the resolution as a receive and file to the council in July, in the meeting in July, and basically have the council bless or grant the use of the $10,000 funds per council member each year. So it'd be an initiation, if you will, and then a quarterly receive and file with the balances and who has been approved. So that is what you have in front of you. And at this point, the next steps would be to obtain feedback from the committee. And if all goes well, then we can move it forward to update the resolution with the city attorney's office and bring it forward to the full council at a future meeting. And contingent upon the council's approval, then the policy could take effect as soon as January 1st of 2019.
Thank you very much. Councilman, feedback?
No, I'm just, I'm delighted that, wherever we can be efficient and more effective, it makes sense. So I like the fact that there would be disclosures, right, at the tail end of, the allocation, so everybody can see how the monies were allocated. So I think that's helpful. I think nobody wants to keep this from the public. These are public funds that are going to public efforts and public support. So I think it's a good thing. The only thing I would just suggest on, drafts of changes to policies that we have, I always work from red line versions just to see what's being stricken and maybe what's being interlineated. Sometimes it's helpful to see where we are. But I think, again, on the changes, they're perfectly fine. That's more just process for me. So it's better. It helps me to better focus on what we're modifying. But great work for staff. Thank you for helping us make this more streamlined.
Thank you, Councilman. I would echo that. Just from it's minor comment, just as far as the redlining, but overall, and I would also echo the efficiency piece. Definitely, we appreciate it. I'm sure it would make it easier for you and for the community groups out there that we're getting a chance to support. So, thank you for bringing that forward. And just for this process as a whole. I remember back a couple years back when this was approved, it had been something we had been considering for some time, because typically it was on there were requests or needs that we saw out there in the community, and it was back then a very cumbersome process where we would have to make a request of the city manager, and then they would have to check to see if there was overall support of the full council, and it was just very complex and convoluted to do something as simple as a couple $100 to be able to do neighborhood association, block party or something. And so this is a way to be able to allow us to support those community groups. So again, the fact that you're helping us make the process more efficient and helping the community is a good thing. So thank you very much. I don't see any additional recommendations or modifications on this one. We can go then to, I think it's council staff comments, if there are any. The city manager, councilman, any comments?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for your work. Meeting's adjourned.